Journey IFC strives to create safe spaces to worship God. Know that you are welcome just as you are, regardless of religious background or lack thereof, skin color, political affiliation, sexuality, age, culture, or any other label you own or society throws on you. You are welcomed and celebrated here just as you are.
Okay, our reading today comes from the prophecy of Isaiah. And I want to just say, some of these prophecies are hard for me to hear and really take in what it means. And so I think it helps if we read it as poetry. But I'm just going to read and pray. Holy Spirit, help us to get what we need from this reading. Comfort, oh comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that she has served her term, that her penalty is paid, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries out, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. Then the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. A voice says, cry out. And I said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass. Their constancy is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades. When the breath of the Lord blows upon it, surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever. Get you up to a high mountain, O Zion, herald of good news. Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. Lift it up, do not fear. Say to the cities of Judah, here is your God. See, the Lord God comes with might, and God's arm rules for God. God's reward is with God, and God's recompense before God. God will feed their flock like a shepherd. God will gather the lambs in God's arms and carry them in their bosom and gently lead the mother sheep.
I invite you to stand up. For all of those who like Christmas music, which I know that's a contentious thing, we're going to have some Christmas music. And so we're going to start with Deck the Halls today. If you know it, sing along. If you don't like it, sing along.
do.
Well, hey everyone there. That was fun, right? I love Christmas and Christmas music and all the movies and stuff, so this week I've been listening to it. My wife Skylar does not, and so I have to listen to it when I'm in the car alone. But I still do, and I sing to all of the songs. So. I'm wondering, is anyone else tired today? Anyone? I'm a little tired. After a week of Thanksgiving and just life, I feel pretty exhausted. I feel like I'm still playing catch up. I think we were saying earlier, I'm playing catch up this week. And I think Thanksgiving is this great time to gather with those we love and to think about all the things we're grateful for. But I think it also marks the start of one of the busiest times of year, so it's a little overwhelming. People are prepping for Christmas. Lists have been made. Someone's checking it twice, maybe. There are places to go, things to do, and time seems to move at some strange, abnormal, fast pace from now until the new year. And so our soul team decided that we would have this series. We're going to call it 'Tis the Season, based on this song that we just sang, Deck the Halls. But this sentiment, 'tis the season, holds some ambiguity here. 'Tis the season to be jolly, but also 'tis the season to be overwhelmed and tired, maybe sad. We enter into this wonderful time of year, but it can also be a very hard time of year as well. And today marks a shift in our church calendar, Church Universal. Today we begin the season of Advent. And Advent comes from a word meaning the coming or the arrival. And this is the time of the year when we shift our focus onto the story of the birth of Jesus, and we talk about hope of new life and a new way, this birth. And Advent is this kind of waiting period where we begin to prepare. It's supposed to be a time when we can slow down and prepare space in our hearts, in our homes, in our lives for hope. This season is a time for reflection and contemplation and anticipation even. So why have we made it so complicated? It feels like we've sold it out to capitalism in some ways. Why is it so busy? Our hope for this series and as a community is that we can return to a more simple celebration this year, and that we can create some space to rest from our schedules and to-do lists when we're here, when we gather. So that's our hope. That's what our soul team is bringing and wanting to do. Another thing we're doing during this series is we're going to be pairing Christmas songs like Deck the Halls with some secular songs. I don't even think that's a good way of putting it, to help us explore God in both the holy and in the ordinary and all in between. So today we begin with two songs, Deck the Halls and The Christians and the Pagans by Dar Williams, which is a really cool song. In Deck the Halls, we sing about preparing our spaces with holly and singing songs together and lighting Yule logs and all of that great Christmas stuff. And this song is just jam-packed full of Christmas imagery and all these holiday traditions. And today we're even going to put up some of those holiday traditions in this space. We're going to do some of those things together. But it's interesting, these traditions did not all originate from Christians and Jesus' birth, right? In fact, many traditions have been borrowed from or appropriated and altered to fit certain religious practices of ours. In particular, Christmas owes a lot to paganism, which is a great, thing with this song. And in particular, the celebration of the winter solstice. So the winter solstice was a time of celebration because it meant that the days were going to start getting longer, that they had made it through the winter, even though I feel like our winter in Texas is like just starting maybe at the solstice. But it was a time of celebration. And so the pagans, they also celebrated around the same time Saturnalia, which was about the god Saturn, and it was a time to honor the god of agriculture because the harvest and all of that. And then they also would celebrate, the god of the sun, which was celebrated on December 25th, which happens to be Christmas. So around the 4th century, Christians, and in particular the Pope, decided to appropriate these holidays for their own celebration of Jesus' birth. They wanted to give it a date. Even though we actually have no idea when Jesus was born. We don't really know what time of year he was born. But maybe in spring, because the shepherds were out with their flocks, that would make more sense. We don't know. So our traditions with, decorating trees with ornaments and hanging wreaths, even having wreaths and even caroling, all of these things come from pagan traditions, which leads to our other song this week, the Christians and the pagans. The song tells us of this mixed family coming together by chance, on a holiday, and the pagans and the Christians are sitting down together on Christmas Eve, and they're sharing in community and their prayers with one another, praying to their respective gods and goddesses. I love that line. And I like the line here. It says, finding faith and common ground as best as they are able. It's a beautiful take on how these approaching holidays can bring us together, even when we believe, act, celebrate different things. This time of year is when we come together and celebrate so much different, Judaism, they have Hanukkah, there's Kwanzaa, then we have New Year's Eve. Those are just a couple of them. There's so many holidays that all are jam-packed. No wonder we're tired. Everyone's busy right now. And as we all probably see, a lot of our holidays overlap with these different imagery. I know Jewish people who have Christmas trees. I know Christians who spin a dreidel. All of these things are mixed, and our traditions are shared with one another. And so as we begin preparing for the season, we may also begin to prepare our homes with trees and ornaments and stockings and lights and wreaths, all these things from other traditions. And looking into where our holiday traditions stem from, I'm reminded how much of us is impacted by others, our other cultures, other practices, other religions. And so as we grow in community with those who are different than us, our traditions may start to change. Just like with my wife's family on Thanksgiving, they always have breakfast first. That's how they start the day. Dessert first. They have dessert for breakfast. That's what I mean. And I never did that. That's a great tradition. I suggest all of you try it at Christmas. It's a good way to start the morning with breakfast. You're not too full. Start with dessert. I cannot get the dessert breakfast. But it's also important whenever we start learning these other traditions and changing our traditions, it's important to be aware of when we have appropriated and co-opted other religious practices, especially when we're doing it in ways that do not honor the original culture, or if we start creating biases against the originators of those traditions. We need to be careful. We cannot condemn the pagans, call them witches and burn them, as the song suggested, or even being anti-Semitic whenever we're using their stories and their text and taking their practices at the same time. We can't diss them and also honor their traditions at the same time. And so our reading this morning, I think, is an example of some practices that have been co-opted by Christians for many years. And that have been appropriated in some way or another for some unrelated things. So the book of Isaiah is this 3-part book. And throughout the book, it's this glimpse of the life of Judah and Israel during the time, it's a long span. We talked about some of this with the book of Lamentations a couple of weeks ago, that the Assyrians came in and kind of destroyed the north, which was Israel, and then the Babylonians came in and destroyed the south, which was Judah, and they were sent into exile by the Babylonians, and the book covers all of that. We see both sides of that, and then we also see them now returning home. So they're getting the opportunity to return home, and Isaiah's words here, even though maybe not Isaiah, is kind of this celebration of we are coming home, we have survived. And the Israelite people at this point in the story have been exiled for around 150 years. That's a long time. That's not just a little while. It's been 150 years span of these oppressive forces, both the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Persians. But in Isaiah 40, there's this shift in language when we hear, "Comfort, O comfort my people. Comfort, O comfort my people." The Israelites had believed that God was punishing them for all this time. And they thought that because they were in relationship and getting all these other practices from other traditions, other nations, other religions, other gods, they thought that God was destroying them because God was angry. But here in Isaiah 40, we see healing taking place. Something is happening. This shift has occurred. The people writing have survived enslavement and exile, and they are now being granted freedom to return home. The book of Isaiah tells of a prophet speaking words of peace and comfort and hope on the behalf of God. First part is Isaiah, second part is maybe not Isaiah, he was appropriated as well here. And when we get closer and closer to Christmas, we start to hear these verses from Isaiah thrown around a lot. In fact, the Gospels quote this section when John the Baptist says, "Prepare a way for the Lord, make the path straight." This is coming directly from this. John the Baptist has appropriated Isaiah's prophecy about a coming hope, this new thing coming, this getting out of exile, this hope, that we're going to have a new, better day. John is taking that and putting it on this birth of Jesus, kind of slapping it on his story. And so the church has taken that for many years and ran with it since basically the beginning. We just wrote this in and we said, okay, yeah, this prophecy is actually about Jesus. But the thing is, the book of Isaiah was not written with Jesus in mind necessarily. Instead, Isaiah was a book about a people who had suffered under the hands of aggressive empires and had come out on the other side, still in relationship with God, wondering, what do we do now? Jesus' whole origin story co-opts Isaiah's prophecy, and it's an appropriation of Jewish tradition, much like how Christians, stole hanging up wreaths from our pagan siblings, those kind of things. The book of Isaiah was not written with Jesus in mind, but does that mean we have to throw out this prophecy and say it has nothing to teach us about Jesus or the season of Christmas and Advent? Do we only do the Christian things? Do we stop hanging ornaments and putting stuff on trees and giving gifts, all these things we've gotten from other people? Does it make sense to read Isaiah's words this time of year? Does it really apply to us? And how do we take something that was used out of context and honor it and the original culture from which it came at the same time? Well, I think it first takes acknowledging how many of our holiday traditions are not exclusive to the church and never were. This means we have to remember that these traditions come from rich cultures and religions, and they're a gift to us. Yes, the holidays can be a burden, but in this season of celebrating across different cultures and religions, we can celebrate with one another by sharing these practices, as long as we remember to honor and give credit where credit is due, making sure that we honor these practices and where they came from. We cannot condemn the cultures from which we borrow anymore. The words of Isaiah speak to a particular context, but these words also feel so comforting to read, at least for me. The comfort, oh comfort my people. Especially in this season of our life as a community, all the crap we've been through recently, as a nation, all that we're going through recently, as a world coming off of COVID and all of that mess, and still in the midst of COVID, we're in this place of needing comfort. We're through a lot of it, and we're wondering, God, where are you? We have witnessed all this great heartache and pain and death these past few years. And at times we probably have wondered where God is and why bad things keep happening to good people that we love. But then we get Isaiah's call, springing forth from the scrolls like a voice calling out in the wilderness saying, make some room. Prepare the way for God to move in new and life-giving ways. Use your voice to cry out. Valleys will be lifted and mountains will be made low. Rough paths will be smoothed. A fair and equitable world is coming. Justice and God's love are hand in hand. And there is something to hope for beyond the pain we are experiencing right now. This season represents that hope. And as we have seen recently, we know that life is finite, and the people here in this reading knew that life was finite. People can fade away just like the grass, it says. And for the Israelites who were listening to Isaiah at that time, they knew intimately about the impermanence of life. They had seen what exile could do to them, 150 years of pain and suffering. But a voice cries out saying that something was steady and sustaining all along. That in God's nature there is something infinite. It makes sense that early Christian, Jewish Jesus followers would have turned to these words when Jesus was born and came on the scene. Because at this point they had been oppressed by the Romans and the Jews and the pagans, kind of a little bit of everyone. And they found comfort in the idea that God was going to show up in the ordinariness of their lives in these extraordinary ways. But how does God show up? For the early Christians, it was in the form of an infant born to an unwed teenage girl. And for Isaiah, God shows up in this beautiful imagery at the end of the reading of as a shepherd caring for their flock and gathering them into God's arms and holding the lambs up to God's bosom. What motherly imagery right there. And gently leading the mother. This maternal image, much like the image of Mary and baby Jesus. After all the pain and suffering that the Israelites had faced and the early Christians faced when they read this text, and that we face as we read these same stories from Isaiah, Advent reminds us to slow down and listen for that voice that continues to cry out these words of hope, telling us that God is in the holy and in the ordinary, that God is in these shared traditions and all these diverse celebrations. So now is the time that we begin to prepare for the birth of something new, but also something that's very old and that is borrowed from many other traditions and families and religions. So as we remember these stories this season, may we be encouraged to see God all around us and the wonder of this season. But also let us prepare some space to make some more rooms, to clear things out, making the rough path smooth, so that we can experience God again in simpleness, so that we can be born unto us, that God can be born unto us in this new and unexpected ways, and that these amazing things can happen that can transform our lives. May this season be a season of waiting for something to come. And may we be patient to see what it is. Amen.